sake, right? All right. We're just again setting the stakes here, but we have 7 or 8 messages. Let's see how it goes. But we're going to think about the enlisted soldier, the enlightened soldier, the equipped soldier, the exercised soldier, the entangled soldier, the embarrassing soldier, the engaged soldier, and the emotional soldier. Not all this morning. That's the outline of the messages moving forward over the next 7 or 8 services. But we want to set a groundwork here this morning. And if I could preach this message as standalone, I think it would be effective. But it is kind of leading us into some deeper thoughts. And so we're going to be touching on a few of the verses that we're going to be looking at in greater detail over the next couple of weeks. But I hope it's a blessing for you. So I was going over my notes this morning, and so this was kind of my what would be the term? My thought, like, well, some of this is kind of harsh, right? Right, okay. But I think the way I'm viewing this is balance sometimes is over multiple messages, right? So this morning is kind of meant to be a call to arms, right? And it's kind of meant to hopefully stir us up and to give us some things to think about, because this is where our starting foundation is. I don't care how good of a soldier you are from a Christian perspective, how good of a Christian you are. I'm assuming you could be better. Can we just start there? Now, whatever I say that's good for you, take that. Whatever maybe you're already excelling at, hey, good, amen, praise the Lord, right? But at least enter it with attitude and an aspect of, is there any of these things I could work on for myself to where maybe I'm pretty good, kind of good, really good, whatever, however you'd like to phrase yourself, but can I be better? And so we're going to look at multiple things this morning. I'll kind of give you the rough outline, and we'll see how much the Lord lets us get through. We're going to look at the soldier's call, the soldier's conduct, the soldier's conflict, and the soldier's crown. That's kind of where we're at this morning. We're going to hit some of these pretty quick. And so we would, as was our text verse, like to start here in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, and think about the soldier's call. Well, I think the first item that we want to think about, we're not going to reread the verse this second, but that it's a hard calling, right? This isn't a calling for the faint of heart. This isn't a calling for people that have trouble standing, right? This is a hard calling. In fact, he calls us out right at the outset of our text, thou therefore endure hardness. And so really what this ought to kind of set us on our path as we think about this morning, that everything that we're going to talk about from right here all the way to wherever we've been, really just in a couple of weeks, it's hard. The Bible says it's hard. He tells you that it's going to be hard. It's not always going to be easy. So does that come as a surprise to anybody? Right? Like, oh, really? It's hard. All right. So we already intuitively know it, either from being familiar with the scriptures, but my guess is you more intuitively know it because your experience has also told you this is hard. This can be difficult. This can be a struggle. And so I think that it helps us with mindset. It helps us with context if we're going into it knowing something's going to be hard, right? And to where you don't wake up and be like, why is this so hard, right? Like, you knew it was going to be hard when you get started. For example, let me give a little, use cars, for example. You ever go to work on something and you think this is going to be easy, right? And, maybe you're doing something. I remember when I was rebuilding an engine, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, I was putting the heads back on. And long story short, I was reusing head bolts. Ended up not being a good idea for reasons I'm about to disclose. So I'm tightening the head bolts on. It's on a stand right out of the engine. And I'm tightening it up, torque wrench, and I'm tightening, I hear snap. And I'm like, oh no, that's not a good sign. I just snapped the head bolt off in the block, right? And it ended up coming out relatively easy. But it's that moment when you feel a bolt snap when you're working on a car, like, this just got way more hard, right? This got can I go without the bolt, right? Right? It's just bolt, right? And so when you're going into it knowing it's going to be hard, it's different than snapping a bolt off halfway through the process, right? And so from a Christian's perspective, you're like, why is it so hard? He said it was going to be hard. He told us it was going to be hard. He said, expect it to be hard. And then not only that, he tells us to endure the hardness. There's the expectation that, stay with me, no matter how hard it gets, you have to endure it. He doesn't say endure most hardness, endure some hardness. It just It's a completely blanket statement that covers all the hard possibilities. Endure hardness. And you see what he says, as a good soldier. You see that? As a good soldier. You the existence, somebody help me out here. The existence of a good soldier implies the existence of what? A bad. All right, y'all are picking up what we're putting down, right? So we understand when we read that it says, do this and you'll be a good soldier. The implication, the unstated obvious is, if you don't do this, you're a bad soldier. It's not that you're not a soldier per se. I mean, but you're just not a good one. And then also this verse, it talks about us. You see, as we think about a hard calling, you see what else he says. Endure hardness as a good soldier. And then he brings the spiritual context into it almost immediately of Jesus Christ, right? And so I would like to kind of plug in all the theology that you know about who Jesus is and take it from there, from the concept of this isn't, as it talks about in Ephesians, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, right? This is a spiritual aspect that we need to be thinking about. He goes on in verse number 4. No man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life. We'll be back kind of talking about this in greater detail, but I at least want to hit it here. And you need to prepare yourself to disengage from things that would make you a bad soldier. I mean, think about it. Maybe we could apply it to work. Maybe that's something we'd be a little bit more familiar with, is that if you are thinking about things that have nothing to do with work, you have a greater possibility of not doing a good job at work, right? They talk about being focused on your task, right? If you're thinking about stuff that has nothing to do with work, well, you're not going to be very good at your work. And that's the idea of being entangled. I would also argue, and I think that the text indicates this, is it will be harder if you are entangled, right? It's one of those things like it's hard enough, right? If you're doing everything right, it only gets harder if you're not even doing everything right, because now you're a soldier who's not doing everything that you should, and there's this expectation, there's this reality of you being involved in things you ought not to be here. Well, what kind of hardness could we be talking about? Well, I think so I said there, well, it says hardness. How is it hard, right? It's not like I had to think for a long time for examples, but I wanted to wrap my mind around and at least help us understand what could be being mentioned here as we think about hardness, because hardness has a lot of different aspects. Things could be physically hard, and I would argue that throughout most of Christianity's history, and I use that in the broadest sense of the word, it has been physically hard to be a Christian. You were literally risking life and limb up to really about 200 years ago across the board, and even a lot of places today. We just read a short update from Brother Varghese last Sunday talking about how India is passing all these anti-conversion laws. And there's a physical hardness that goes along with it, but there's emotional hardness. There's, if you don't experience emotional hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ, you're doing something wrong, right? It is inherent, intrinsic in being a good soldier. There's emotional baggage is not the best term, but we're talking about the negative aspects. There's this emotional kind of negativity that we have to work through. There's mental hardness, and it can create relationship hardness. And all I'm saying is that being a good soldier, it's a hard call. This isn't something that you ought to go into as it's not that big of a deal. That's why I've not been in the military. I think out of people here in my knowledge, only Brother Reynolds has, but I've read a book or two, so I'm basing it a little bit on that. And I think without exception, let's back up that. Generally speaking, before they send you off to war or even kind of turn you loose in the military, they put you through what? Boot camp. I don't know if it's exactly called that. Probably with Trump back it may be, but I don't know if it's always been called. Right. And basically they're making it as hard on you as they can, so that when you get to combat, you're like, oh, what a relief it is, right? Like, at least I'm not in boot camp anymore, right? So they're intentionally bringing hardness into your life in order to make you better suitable to deal with the hardness when it actually matters. And anytime armies don't do that, there's a negative aspect. You can read stories in World War II, especially towards the end, the Germans, they were drafting everybody from 13 to 70, right? And yeah, and basically giving them a helmet and a rifle and sending them to the front lines. Okay, well, you've not prepared them for anything, and you can expect their production, their good ability, whatever the term is, right, to be commensurate with the training that they've gotten. And all I'm saying is, if you're going to endure hardness, the only way to endure it is to endure it, right? You're going to have to build yourself up to that. So it is a hard calling. Let's go. You're close to 1 Timothy chapter 1. 1 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 18. This charge, it's a high calling. That's what we're thinking about, a high calling. 1 Timothy 1:18. This charge I commit unto thee, son Timothy, according to the prophecies which went before on thee, that thou by them mightest war a good warfare. I would also point out, really not kind of my point here in this verse, but it's kind of on my mind, the fact of how often Paul used this language of military when he's talking to these young preachers, right? And it's almost like he's telling them, be prepared, right? This is what's coming. So he's again invoking this thought process that thou by them mightest war a good warfare. I want to give you two thoughts here before we move on to our next subpoint. Follow the good examples in your life. Right? Follow the people, and I say in your life, and I mean that in a practical sense. Look around the room, if you will. Look at the wider, the wider circle of maybe independent Baptists that use the King James Version, who are local church, local missions. I could go on, but we'll stop right there and use them as these are men that have stood the test of time, that have endured the hardest. I want to be like them, and I'm not idolizing a man, but even Paul says, and I'm paraphrasing, follow me even as I follow Christ. And my guess is, if you're thinking about the right type of role model, their attitude would be that, yeah, sure, come on after me. I'm going towards Christ. And so we're looking at immediate role models. You can pick up the pages of Scripture and find role models. Say, well, this is hard. This is difficult. I don't feel like doing this. Read through the Bible and see everybody that dealt with hard, difficult things that God required out of them. Think of the story of Hosea. Think of the story of Jeremiah, of all the patriarchs and everything that God expected out of them, required out of them, yea, even demanded out of them. And I realize it's kind of the stories of the good guys, right? But none of them quit. And you can even sometimes see struggles and difficulties, but they all continued to follow God, that thou by them mightest war a good warfare. Shall we do the exercise again? Somebody help me. When it says that thou mightest war a good warfare, what does that imply the existence of? Bad warfare. You can be bad, right? And you could be, to apply it to our thought process, really what it is warfare, hardness, separates the good soldiers from the bad soldiers. That's how, it's easy to come to church when nothing's going on. Let's see when there's conflict in schedule, whether or not you're having one of those days. And so one or two things happen. You know exactly the type of day I'm talking about, or you don't, and you will, right? Those are the two options. And you come to church anyhow, because I want to be a good soldier. Good soldiers don't not show up because they're not having a good day. That is the quintessential definition of a bad soldier. Warfare separates the good soldiers from the bad one. What is it? It's in Proverbs. This is the reference I'm going to give. I may not be right. 24:17. If thou faint in the day of adversity, God said, your strength is small. It's, I've thought of a lot of ways, and I looked at that verse, I was like, how's the nicest way we can put this? And it is very difficult to couch that in a term that doesn't appear to be very condescending to people who quit, is really what it comes down to. So it is a high calling. Go to John chapter 14. And really, the interest of full disclosure, this isn't directly related to warfare, but I'm pulling in this concept of the Bible that will help you be a good soldier, right? That's what we're thinking, an honorable calling. John 14:15. You could have looked at any number of a dozen verses plus that tell us something like this. If you love me, keep my What does it say? Suggestions. No, you know it doesn't say that. You don't even have to open the Bible to know the Bible. God never suggests anything. He never said it'd be a really nice idea. It's either do it or he doesn't even reference it, right? If you keep my commandments. Listen, you know the good part of this is we've been, again, using, we're metaphorically talking, right? Allegorizing, whatever, symbolizing, all that good stuff, right? We've been doing this for 2,000 years now, right? Christians in the Christian sense of the word, since Jesus came. We ain't making none of this up as we go along. You don't look in there and find a commandment and be like, nobody's ever seen this commandment before. This is all well documented. People have been spilling ink about this stuff before the apostles were cold in their graves, right? This is all. If you love God, you'll do what God says. And I'm pulling this into our allegory, acknowledging that it's not directly referring soldiers. Good soldiers, if they love what they're following, they'll do what they're told, right? And if you won't obey, it's because you don't love. People that don't follow the rules, you know what? Man, my throat is dry. They make bad soldiers. And you can follow. So the analogy always breaks down. In a real army, I assume, pretty sure, that you can follow orders so poorly that one of two things will eventually happen. They'll kick you out with probably a dishonorable discharge if they're feeling especially vindictive, right? Or they're going to put you in prison. Leavenworth, last I checked, I didn't look it up right now, but it's full of military prisoners who probably ultimately didn't do what they were told, right? And so you gotta follow the rules. Say, how can I be a good soldier? It's an honorable. Follow the rules. You know what? There is never a restriction in the Bible placed on going all out for Christ. You hear what I say? There's never any restriction placed on going all out for Christ. When you think about, I'm only familiar with the United States, right? As a general, and again, just in the most general sense, I would freely admit. But let's see how familiar you are. Y'all paying attention? Y'all staying with me? What is the highest military award for meritorious service? The Medal of Honor. All right, so you're right. And it kind of goes down from there. You have the Silver Cross and other things, right? Down to, Silver Star. I'm sorry, that's a little German right there, right? So the Silver Star, right? And kind of walks down from there. But the medal, and you know what? The Medal of Honor, generally speaking, is the kind of medal they hand out after you get killed, right? It's not always, but generally speaking, that's the kind that they send back to your family. They don't, it's uncommon to get it and survive the situation. And oftentimes, I've got a whole book on Medal of Honor recipients. It's not super current. I think it quit before we got involved in the Middle East extensively, so it's probably stopped in the late 80s. And oftentimes, the term that they'll use, does anybody know what the term that is often used in a Medal of Honor kind of statement? That is also unfortunately true. Right. Uncommon valor above and beyond the call of duty. And so what the military is recognizing that while we expect valor of everybody, this guy was something special. While there's a level of duty, we didn't even expect him to do that, right? We're glad he did. People are thankful he did. Maybe he saved lives or took lives in such a way that saved, and it's like there is a duty as a soldier, but we don't even expect you to do that. Above and beyond the call of duty. The best of the best. And I'm not talking about, I know Medal of Honor guys have done a lot of bad things. So I'm not saying that they're great guys. I'm just talking about from a purely military standpoint. You're like, he said all of Medal of Honor guys. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about what they did to earn that above and beyond the call of duty. You realize you can do that too as a Christian. Do you know? Hey, I'm not telling you these things prescriptively, only illustratively, but just stay with me. Do you realize you can give 90% of your money to the Lord and live off of 10? You say, well, I can't. Well, you could if you really, really wanted to. Or at least do better than 90-10, right? Could you at least in college, maybe not 10-90, but you realize you could knock doors every night of the week if you wanted to, and no one would stop you. You realize you could show up to the church 3 nights a week and pray on your own? Pray for the church. Pray for the community. Pray for the church leadership. Pray for missionaries. We'd probably cut you a key and let you have free access anytime you wanted if that's what you wanted to do. Y'all looking at me like, I don't know, but I'm telling you right now, you could do that if you wanted to. You realize you could write your own concordance? Start in Genesis 1:1 and write down why would I do that? Strong already did. Well, just because someone's already done it doesn't mean that it's not above and beyond the call of duty for you to do it. Think of how well you would know the Bible if you wrote your own concordance. Write your own commentary. Like, there's things I don't understand. We'll do what the other guys do and just skip that part, right? Like, that's generally what commentaries do, right? So, but enough of it's pretty easy, right? Go verse, but Gill does it. That's really the one that comes immediately to mind as far as taking every verse, breaking it into its phrase, and talking about it for a paragraph, right? You could do that if you wanted to. You could do it the Matthew Henry style, where maybe a little bit of a longer passage, kind of outline it, give devotional type. You could do that if you wanted to. You could sing a special at every church service if you wanted to. I'm acknowledging some logistics that may go into that one, but ain't nobody here that couldn't sing more if they wanted to. You could be the first one at church every time and the last one to leave. Nobody is stopping you from doing that. You could clean the church building from top to bottom, from front to back after every service if you wanted to. You could mow the yard every 4 days, and it needed it because you fertilized it and watered it. Now, again, these aren't prescriptive things. They're illustrative. All I'm saying is if you wanted to be more involved, if you wanted to do more things, it's not like, you say, well, I hadn't thought of most of that. There's more, lots more, right? Like, it really is all it's indicative of our own heart. Good soldiers don't be like, I just don't really know, there's a war going on. People are dying all around me. I just don't really know what I can really do here. If somebody would tell me what to do, I'd do it. I guess you don't really need nothing. Nobody's telling me anything. And meanwhile, their immediate supervisor or their lieutenant over there trying to direct a lot of stuff, trying to be engaged. And you're just over there, well, if they need something, they'll get a hold of it. That's not above and beyond the call of duty. So how interested are you in being a good soldier? There's also other terms. And another term, gross dereliction of duty. Tithe when it's convenient. Not only will you not knock doors every night when you get off, you won't even show up every other Saturday for outreach. You wouldn't come to a prayer meeting if it was scheduled. You won't read your Bible every day, much less study it. Not only will you not sing a special, I told you it's going to come across kind of harsh, guys. I'm just trying to be real with us this morning. You won't sing a special in church, much less even try with a hymn. Listen, I led. It's been a while since. It's been 2 or 3 years since I led the singing, but I'm telling you, I have seen it all. Right? I led singing for a long time. There are different ways to sing. Let's pick a song. A new name and glory. Think, I was once a sinner, but I came pardoned to receive from my Lord. This was freely given, and I found that he always kept his word. I was humbly kneeling at the cross, fearing not but God's angry frown, when the heavens opened and I saw that my name was written down. In the book 'tis written, saved by grace. Oh, the joy that came to my soul. Now I am forgiven, and I know by the blood I am made whole. And I've seen people sing it, and maybe you've been guilty. I was once a sinner, but I came pardon to receive from my Lord. This was freely given, and I found. I'm not even asking you to sing a special at this point. I'm just asking you to do your duty. I was once a sinner, but I came pardon to receive from my Lord. This was freely given, and I found that he always kept his. Okay, I started that way too high for one, right? I acknowledge that. But you know what? I wouldn't mind hearing a voice squeak every now and then because someone was giving it everything they had to sing a song that talked about how Jesus reached down and saved them. The least we can do is sing every song like you meant it and be thankful that the piano starts us in a comfortable range, right? Right. This is what we have. So you won't even try with hymns sometimes, and you'll come late to church and check out mentally before we're done. Sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't. You preach enough and you see people checking out. Like, I'm done. He may not be done, but I am, right? We probably can all be guilty of it. All I'm asking is, do you love him? How does it look when a person loves the God that saved them? I ought to make them a good soldier. Oh, we're just getting started. Look at Hebrews chapter 13. Hebrews chapter 13. We ain't going to get through all of this, but that's fine. We're just going to preach till it's quitting time, and then, like they say, you ain't ever done. You just got to stop at some point, right? So Hebrews 13. So we've looked at. Let's recap. A hard calling. This is fun, right? A high calling. Midas war, good warfare, an honorable calling. Our desire ought to be when about to preach my last point again, right? Our desire ought to be when we get done that people remember the impact we had in our church. That ought to, and you say, well, then it ought to be all about serving God. Well, if you'll serve him, like your life depended upon it, it will have the effect. It ought not to be the goal. It'll be the effect of loving our God. And then a humble calling. Hebrews 13:17. Obey them that have the rule over you. Submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls, as they must give account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that's unprofitable for you. Well, I'll just hit this a good look, and we'll try to get 2 points in before we wrap up. Humble calling. You're not in charge. Really, in one sense, none of us are, right? You know, we all have different roles that admittedly have more of a supervisory leading role, but none of us are ultimately in charge. None of us are writing the rules as we go. Everything is contained in this, right? So you aren't in charge. I got bad news for you. You ain't getting promoted around here. There's no hierarchy for you to aspire to. It's nobody's serving the master. Period. There's no chance for advancement. We don't need more chiefs. We need more Indians, right? And I maybe that's not a politically correct illustration at this point. I don't know, but I mean it, man. We need people who just will work and do the kind of the mundane things. Too many people. I thought about this a lot as I was going over it this morning. I say a lot for a couple of minutes. I said, well, do people actually want to be in charge, or do they just want to take pot shots at who's in charge, right? It's like, I don't actually want to make the call. I just want to gripe about every call that is made. Obey them that have the rule over you. You're being ruled over. That ain't my opinion. Let me rephrase that. It's not only my opinion, right? I do agree with it. This is what God says. You're being ruled over. When somebody is your ruler, we all know what it means. Have you ever in your life, even if you don't instantly, had somebody that you were, they don't use this terminology very much in a workplace because it has a pejorative effect on people, but your boss is your ruler. Now they may coach it and we're all team members. Yeah, but you're the coach, right? You get to bench people, you get to cut people, right? And so I understand, and I'm not even opposed to putting stuff in the least offensive language, but ultimately you have a ruler, you've maybe been a ruler, and our job is to obey. You go through the whole Bible, start to finish. If you don't believe me, make your own concordance and prove me wrong, right? And what you're going to find is, I honestly did study this, did word search. Does the Bible ever tell us to make sure everybody knows your opinion on something? I could not find. About the closest example that I could find was Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, right? And we all know how that turned out, right? So it's just rarely, if ever, put in a positive light. I just want them to know what I think. Why? What what aren't we just all trying to win souls for Jesus and keep the ministry going forward? Really, all the little details really doesn't matter. And if you have a authority problem, you can say, well, that's easy for you to say. Well, okay, I guess maybe, but it's like I haven't been in church most of my life and been told what to do, right? I mean, in fact, I'm to the point where tell me what to do, right? Like, just eliminate all. But all I'm saying is a humble calling, a good soldier does what he's told, period. And no, we're not going to talk about it, right? Just do what you're told. What does the Bible say? What's the direction of leadership? Just be willing to say, you tell me what you want. You tell me what you need, and I'm going to follow. I'm going to support. And as long as it's not doctrinally wrong, morally wrong, but is that really what our concern is here? I don't think so. So, point number one, a soldier's call. Let's skip to Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 10 and think about the soldier's conflict. Ephesians 6, and we're not spending a lot of time here. Again, some of these passages we'll be coming back to in an actual full-length message and hitting it a lick. I believe that we're going to spend at least a service here. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 10. In fact, I just want to read one verse. The whole context, Pastor just taught through it maybe a year ago at this point, but Ephesians 6:10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. That's a good, be strong in the Lord. That's a good verse. So I would point out a couple of things. Number one, or really just one thing from this verse before we move on. It's going to be tough. You know why you need to be strong? Because you don't ever know how strong you have to be. Does that make sense? Our desire ought to be strong. And sometimes you can be using strength for something like, I don't know what's going to happen if I keep going this. So Alicia just bought that truck, right? So I was changing the oil on Friday night, and so I had my ratchet on the oil drain plug, and I put pressure. I'm like, that feels super tight. Like, okay. I'm like, now, did somebody, put thread locker on this or something? And so I put a little bit more pressure, and I'm like, oh man, don't please, right? And so it's like I said, I can break. My thought was, it's an oil pan. I guarantee I can get this boat out. But my concern was it going back in, right, and not leaking, right? And so you're applying strength to something, right? You're putting leverage. And man, I changed the front brakes on that Yukon, and they put thread lock. It took me a long time. They put thread locker on the brake bolts, and I'm talking, man, I was moving heaven. I mean, what does Archimedes say? Give me a lever big enough that I could move the whole world, right? I was hanging off the end of a 20-foot breaker bar, right? And it's like something's gonna break, right? And we're gonna get. And it's strength, right? You're putting pressure, you're opposing resistance, and you're trying to break it loose. And then when it does, it's like, oh, that wasn't so bad, right? And listen, that's what strength does, right? It's like you feel the pressure, you feel the tension, you feel the resistance, and almost, and slightly hyperbolically speaking, I'll admit that you get over it, and almost always, not always, look back and say, oh, that wasn't that bad after all, right? Like, next breaks I could do. I know how to get the brakes off next time, right? Right. And so all I'm saying is be strong. How do you get strong? By exercising. By the only way to increase strength, this may not be medically correct, but I think it's generally correct, is to increase resistance. Does that make sense? You gotta be pushing against something, right? You could do this all day, right? And I'm not saying that I think the value would be negligible, right? You may be sore the next day if you did it long enough, but my guess is you get bored and quit before you ever got sore doing something like that, right? And so really, if you want to gain strength, you got to put weight in your arms, right? And you got to go to failure, right? And you got to give it 2 minutes, and you got to go to failure again. That's how you increase strength. But then you think, I want to be a strong Christian. It's almost like the idea of saying, God, teach me patience. Like, are you sure that that's what you want to? Right. When you say, God, I want to be a strong Christian. The only way to increase strength is to increase the pressure and the resistance against you. And I would argue that, at least in this context, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, he's telling you to be strong because you're going to need the strength at some point in the future. And the good thing at least, again, kind of generally speaking, the good thing, if you will, about this is there are ways to increase strength without being actually engaged in the conflict. Let me give you an example for that. I've watched a fair number of like police body cam videos and stuff like that, and oftentimes you find them when we got a non-compliant subject that they are going to transfer to the ground. So I think the legal way to put it, right? And what you find is a lot of times people go up and they basically just kind of start grappling with the person, right? Basically, they're just kind of wrestling, standing up, right? And you know, most people, most officers, and I'm just saying my anecdotal observations is struggle greatly when it comes to hands-on. But every once in a while, you'll see a video and you'll find a guy walk up, do like a leg sweep, put the guy on his back, straddle him, basically control his hips, have him flipped over and a hand pinned behind his back before the guy could even get mad, right? And generally speaking, it's because the guy has done some jiu-jitsu. Not always as a role, but something like that. And you know what? The guy didn't watch a video on jiu-jitsu and they go out and try it on a non-compliant subject in the field. My guess is he's practiced with buddies and friends and partners and teachers, up to years, right? To where when this guy says, I ain't going to jail, cop's like, I was hoping you'd say that, right? And he goes over there and changes his mind without the guy's permission, right? But you know what? That officer doesn't gain the skills of jiu-jitsu. I think that's typically what you're going to use for that kind of stuff. He doesn't gain those skills by watching YouTube videos. He gains it by going to work or going to classes every day after work and practicing his art. And he's gaining skills against friends. He's gaining skills against people that like him, maybe even love him, that want the best for him. And so when he goes out, he faces someone that would just as soon take his life as listen to him. He has confidence. Like, okay, you say you're not going to jail, but you are. And I know you are because I've done this so many times in practice that you're not even going to know what hits you by the time I catch up with you. And you see that played out in practice because he's been practicing. Let's take this over to the spiritual application. You wonder why you get engaged in spiritual warfare and you're like, right? You're like, I got it. And you're like, sit back up, right? And like, he's running, right? You realize why you're acting like that. You haven't been practicing. You haven't been studying. You haven't been, you say, when I try to minister to somebody with the gospel, I can't keep focused and they distract me and you realize you can practice stuff like that. Find somebody in the church, get up I'll do it with you and I'll role play with you. I'll interact with you and ask you questions and make you learn how to respond. And no, it's not going to be the exact same level of interaction. The same way that jiu-jitsu in a classroom is at the same level because a person loves you. He's trying to help you, but it'll make you better. And all I'm saying, you can't expect to be strong. You can't expect to be effective. You can't expect to be a good soldier if all you do is sit on your couch and watch TV. It just don't work like that. What else do we want to talk about? Oh, let's 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse number 12. Look at what it says there. 1 Timothy 6:12. Somebody help me, fight the good fight of faith. You don't know what I'm about to ask y'all? If it tells you that there's a good fight, what does that imply the existence of? A bad fight. You realize you could be fighting the fight of faith poorly, inadequately. And Paul talked about, and the context is maybe not one for one, but it's illustrative language, as one that beateth the air, right? Like it's just ineffective. Fight the good fight of faith. Lay hold on eternal life, whereunto thou art also called and hast professed a good profession before many witnesses. What kind of fight are you fighting? You ought to be thriving in the conflict, right? That's why think about military. The metaphor we go on. You have different levels of military, right? You have just your kind of average Army infantry guy, right? He's been through 12 weeks of boot camp, probably at this point, you're going to spend, if you're in the infantry, you're going to spend about 6 weeks in an advanced infantry training course when you get out of boot camp, and you're going to specialize in your MOS, and you're going to be especially from an overall world point of view as an American person in the military, you're going to be a above average competency in military activity. You're going to be able to, all the tactics and stuff. You're going to have that down. But you realize it goes way up from there, right? You have things like the 75th Ranger Battalion, who are considered special forces. You have the 101st and 82nd Airborne and Air Assault Divisions, who have even extra training. Then you get up into like Tier 3 Special Operations Forces, and you can keep moving up. You have Delta. You have the EOD people, you have Navy SEALs, you have the Parajump Rescue, you have MARSOC, Marine Raiders, you have sniper school you can go to, and basically you keep working yourself up. Depending on who you talk to, who the best is, that can vary a little bit. But let's just say, for sake of argument, the Navy SEALs are the pinnacle of U.S. military achievement. If they're not the pinnacle, they're right there at it, right? But you realize they had to work for that. They had to strive for that. And you know what? In general, if you're in the military and everything is going sideways on you, and you call in for support, say, we're getting overran, send help, and they're like, well, we have, the 1st Infantry Division, 38th Battalion, 14th Regiment, 38th E Company coming to get you. Like, well, I'm thankful for anything. But if they say we have SEAL Team 8 on a couple of helicopters, they'll be there in 30 minutes. You'll be like, that's what I'm talking about, right? It's about to be a bad day for some guys around here, right? And it's all because you understand that they have, again, from a human perspective, reached the peak of military performance as a general rule. And these are the guys, when I get in a bind, send the best to come and get me. And all I'm asking you is, where are you at on that list? See, enlisting is easy. Everybody's in the infantry, right? That's an easy place. You realize you have to work to get into you have to apply for selection school. And some of them, who is it? Not the Green Berets. It's not Delta Force. I don't know. It's literally invitation only. They pull from Tier 1 Special Operations Forces, and we have to just kind of become aware of you. And if we want you, we'll ask you. Right? There's all these different, and listen, none of that's even, you have to work for it as a Christian, but I'll steal from the Army right here, right now. You can be all that you can be, all if you want to be, right? And let me tell you right now, you are everything you want to be. Wherever your level of Christianity is today, wherever your level of Christian soldierhood is right here, right now, is exactly where you want it to be. Say, well, no, I'd like to. No, you don't. You wouldn't. Well, let me rephrase. Yeah, you'd like. I'd like $1 million too. Let's see who gets there first, right? We can say, I'd like to be better at this. I'd like to be better at that. And then we go doom scroll Facebook reels for an hour. All I'm saying is, you are exactly the type of Christian you have been training to be. And I'm about to quit, but I'd like to leave y'all on a loving note, but we'll see how that works out. And you're scared to sing specials in church. You're scared to knock doors. You won't hardly do anything. You don't tithe. You'd be in Leavenworth if you were in the U.S. military. All I'm saying is fight the good fight. Hey, man, this is a worthy pursuit to have. Let's find a good place to quit after I just told you that. Let's see. Here's a good verse. We'll stop right here. Romans 8:37, all the way at the end, the soldier's crown. You don't have to turn over there. Nay, in all these things, we are more than conquerors through him that loved us, right? Let's bring it around and end on a good note. But seriously, though, I told you at the outset that it was not going to be pleasant at times, and it was about what I expected, right? But I say all of that to where as we preach 7 or 8 more messages here, that you come and saying, I want to be better. I want to be more effective. I want to be stronger. I want to be more exercised. I want to be more equipped. We're going to talk about it from a couple of negative words. I don't want to be entangled. I don't want to be an embarrassment, right? And you can only do that if you want it. If you want it. I'm going to lay out the material. I expect to do a fairly middling job, right? I mean, they may be the best messages I ever preach. Probably not. I think they'll be adequate. I think if you'll let the Word of God speak to you, it will suffice. But really what it comes down to is over the next 7 or 8 services, really the next 2 Sundays, it's up to you. Are you even going to be here? Are you going to be here and ready to say, God, I'm not who I need to be. I'm low-level infantry, 1 foot in Leavenworth, and I want to be better. Give me something that I can be better with. And you can be, and it's where we're at. We're more than conquerors. God, talking about, is it in Romans chapter 2 or 2 Peter chapter 1? I know those aren't really that close. He's talking about giving us all things that pertain unto life and godliness. You have everything. God says it's all right here. Everything you need from that. It's not a playground we're on. I think Tozer I believe he originated. It's not a playground, it's a battleground. When we trusted Christ, we were not only saved from sin, we were enlisted into his service. The New Testament repeatedly pictures the believer as a soldier, chosen by the captain, trained for endurance, equipped for the fight, and engaged against real conflict with the world, the flesh, and the devil. A soldier's life is marked by hardship, discipline, loyalty, and courage, and filled with purpose, fellowship, and victory. In this series, I trust that we walk through some passages. We'll see what it means to be a good soldier of Jesus Christ. And we'll follow the soldier's journey, enlisted by Christ, enlightened by his truth, equipped with his armor, exercised through discipline, warned not to be entangled or an embarrassment, engaged in the good fight, and sustained in the peace that Christ alone can give. Each step will show us how to stand strong, fight faithful, and finish well. Not bringing shame, but honor to the one who has called us to be his soldiers. I appreciate your attention. I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks, and I'm done. So do you want to sing a song, or you want to talk? Or all right, let's